Okay, before we get started, can I just ask you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, or if you're listening as a podcast, leave an evaluation or what you call them. Only because we're getting close to 100,000 subs on YouTube, so and 60% of the people who listen don't subscribe. So if you are one of those 60%, just hit the subscribe button, and that tells YouTube that I'm doing the right thing, and it will show it to more people, which will help everybody in the world. Maybe. Anyway, just subscribe, please. Just get yourself now into the locked drawer, and after that we'll start.
Everybody dies, don't they? Everybody dies, don't they? Isn't that so?
You tried to get into the locked drawer today, didn't you?
How do the dead come back, Mother? What's the secret of the dead come back?
An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge by Ambrose Bierce. 1. A man stood upon a railroad bridge in northern Alabama, looking down into the swift water 20 feet below. The man's hands were behind his back, the wrists bound with a cord. A rope closely encircled his neck. It was attached to a stout cross timber above his head, and the slack fell to the level of his knees. Some loose boards laid upon the ties supporting the rails of the railway supplied a footing for him and his executioners, 2 private soldiers of the Federal Army, directed by a sergeant who in civil life may have been a deputy sheriff. At a short remove upon the same temporary platform was an officer in the uniform of his rank, armed. He was a captain. A sentinel at each end of the bridge stood with his rifle in the position known as support, that is to say, vertical in front of the left shoulder, the hammer resting on the forearm thrown straight across the chest, a formal and unnatural position, enforcing an erect carriage of the body. It did not appear to be the duty of these 2 men to know what was occurring at the centre of the bridge. They merely blockaded the 2 ends of the foot planking that traversed it. Beyond one of the sentinels, nobody was in sight. The railroad ran straight away into a forest for 100 yards, then curving was lost to view. Doubtless there was an outpost farther along. The other bank of the stream was open ground, a gentle slope topped with a stockade of vertical tree trunks loopholed for rifles, with a single embrasure through which protruded the muzzle of a brass cannon commanding the bridge. Midway up the slope between the bridge and fort were the spectators, a single company of infantry in line at parade rest, the butts of their rifles on the ground, the barrels inclining slightly backward against the right shoulder, the hands crossed upon the stock. A lieutenant stood at the right of the line, at the point of his sword upon the ground, his left hand resting upon his right. Excepting the group of 4 at the centre of the bridge, not a man moved. The company faced the bridge, staring stonily, motionless. The sentinels, facing the banks of the stream, might have been statues to adorn the bridge. The captain stood with folded arms, silent, observing the work of his subordinates, but making no sign. Death is a dignitary who, when he comes announced, is to be received with formal manifestations of respect, even by those most familiar with him. In the code of military etiquette, silence and fixity are forms of deference. The man who was engaged in being hanged was apparently about 35 years of age. He was a civilian, if one might judge from his habit, which was that of a planter. His features were good, a straight nose, firm mouth, broad forehead, from which his long dark hair was combed straight back, falling behind his ears to the collar of his well-fitting frock coat. He wore a moustache and pointed beard, but no whiskers. His eyes were large and dark grey, and he had a kindly expression, which one would hardly have expected in one whose neck was in the hemp. Evidently this was no vulgar assassin. The liberal military code makes provision for hanging many kinds of persons, and gentlemen are not excluded. The preparations being complete, The two private soldiers stepped aside, and each drew away the plank upon which he had been standing. The sergeant turned to the captain, saluted, and placed himself immediately behind that officer, who in turn moved apart one pace. These movements left the condemned man and the sergeant standing on the two ends of the same plank, which spanned 3 of the cross ties of the bridge. The end upon which the civilian stood, almost but not quite, reached a 4th. This plank had been held in place by the weight of the captain. It was now held by that of the sergeant. At a signal from the former, the latter would step aside. The plank would tilt, and the condemned man go down between 2 ties. The arrangement commended itself to his judgment as simple and effective. His face had not been covered, nor his eyes bandaged. He looked a moment at his unsteadfast footing, then let his gaze wander to the swirling water of the stream racing madly beneath his feet. A piece of dancing driftwood caught his attention, and his eyes followed it down the current. How slowly it appeared to move! What a sluggish stream! He closed his eyes in order to fix his last thoughts upon his wife and children. The water, touched to gold by the early sun, the brooding mists under the banks at some distance down the stream, the fort, the soldiers, the piece of drift, all had distracted him. And now he became conscious of a new disturbance. Striking through the thought of his dear ones was sound which he could neither ignore nor understand, a sharp, distinct metallic percussion like the stroke of a blacksmith's hammer upon the anvil. It had the same ringing quality. He wondered what it was, and whether immeasurably distant or nearby. It seemed both. Its recurrence was regular, but as slow as the tolling of the death knell. He awaited each new stroke with impatience, and he knew not why. Apprehension. The intervals of silence grew progressively longer. The delays became maddening. With their greater infrequency, the sounds increased in strength and sharpness. They hurt his ear like the thrust of a knife. He feared he would shriek. What he heard was the ticking of his watch. He unclosed his eyes and saw again the water below him. If I could free my hands, he thought, I might throw off the noose and spring into the stream. By diving, I could evade the bullets, and swimming vigorously reach the bank, take to the woods, and get away home. My home, thank God, is as yet outside their lines. My wife and little ones are still beyond the invaders' farthest advance. As these thoughts, which have here to be set down in words, were flashed into the doomed man's brain rather than evolved from it, the captain nodded to the sergeant. The sergeant stepped aside. 2. Peyton Farker was a well-to-do planter of an old and highly respected Alabama family. Being a slave owner, and like other slave owners, a politician, he was naturally an original secessionist and ardently devoted to the Southern cause. Circumstances of an imperious nature, which it is unnecessary to relate here, had prevented him from taking service with that gallant army which had fought the disastrous campaigns ending with the fall of Corinth, and he chafed under the inglorious restraint, longing for the release of his energies, the larger life of the soldier, the opportunity for distinction. That opportunity, he felt, would come, as it comes to all in wartime. Meanwhile, he did what he could. No service was too humble for him to perform in the aid of the South, no adventure too perilous for him to undertake if consistent with the character of a civilian who was at heart a soldier, and who, in good faith and without too much qualification, assented to at least a part of the frankly villainous dictum that all is fair in love and war. One evening, while Farker and his wife were sitting on a rustic bench near the entrance to his grounds, a grey-clad soldier rode up to the gate and asked for a drink of water. Mrs. Farker was only too happy to serve him with her own white hands. While she was fetching the water, her husband approached the dusty horseman and inquired eagerly for news from the front. "The Yanks are repairing the railroad," said the man, "and are getting ready for another advance. They've reached the Owl Creek Bridge, put it in order, and built a stockade on the north bank. The Commandant has issued an order, which is posted everywhere, declaring that any civilian caught interfering with the railroad, its bridges, tunnels or trains will be summarily hanged. I saw the order. How far is it to the Owl Creek Bridge? Farquhar asked. About 30 miles. Is there no force on this side of the creek? Only a picket post half a mile out on the railroad and a single sentinel at this end of the bridge. Suppose a man, a civilian and a student of hanging, should elude the picket post and perhaps get the better of the sentinel, said Farquhar, smiling. What could he accomplish? The soldier reflected. I was there a month ago, he replied. I observed that the flood of last winter had lodged a great quantity of driftwood against the wooden pier at this end of the bridge. It's now dry and would burn like tinder. The lady had now brought the water, which the soldier drank. He thanked her ceremoniously, bowed to her husband, and rode away. An hour later, after nightfall, he repassed the plantation, going northward in the direction from which he had come. He was a Federal scout. 3. As Peyton Farquhar fell straight downward through the bridge, he lost consciousness and was as one already dead. From this state he was awakened ages later, it seemed to him, by the pain of a sharp pressure upon his throat, followed by a sense of suffocation. Keen, poignant agony seemed to shoot from his neck downward through every fibre of his body and limbs. These pains appeared to flash along well-defined lanes of ramification and to beat with an inconceivably rapid periodicity. They seemed like streams of pulsating fire heating him to an intolerable temperature. As to his head, he was conscious of nothing but a feeling of fullness, of congestion. These sensations were unaccompanied by thought. The intellectual part of his nature was already effaced. He had power only to feel, and feeling was torment. He was conscious of motion. Encompassed by a luminous cloud, of which he was now merely the fiery heart without material substance, he swung through unthinkable arcs of oscillation like a vast pendulum. Then, all at once, with a terrible suddenness, the light about him shot upward with the noise of a loud splash. A frightful roaring was in his ears, and all was cold and dark. The power of thought was restored. He knew that the rope had broken and he had fallen into the stream. There was no additional strangulation. The noose about his neck was already suffocating him and kept the water from his lungs. To die of hanging at the bottom of a river, the idea seemed to him ludicrous. He opened his eyes in the darkness and saw above him a gleam of light, but how distant, how inaccessible. He was still sinking, for the light became fainter and fainter until it was a mere glimmer. Then it began to grow and brighten, and he knew that he was rising toward the surface, knew it with reluctance, for he was now very comfortable. To be hanged and drowned, he thought, it's not so bad, but I do not wish to be shot. No, I will not be shot. That's not fair. He was not conscious of an effort, but a sharp pain in his wrist apprised him that he was trying to free his hands. He gave the struggle his attention, as an idler might observe the feat of a juggler without interest in the outcome. What splendid effort! What magnificent! What superhuman strength! Oh, that was a fine endeavour! Bravo! The cord fell away. His arms parted and floated upward, the hands dimly seen on each side in the growing light. He watched them with a new interest as first one and then the other pounced upon the noose at his neck. They tore it away and thrust it fiercely aside, its undulations resembling those of a water snake. "Put it back! Put it back!" He thought he shouted these words to his hands, for the undoing of the noose had been succeeded by the direst pang that he had yet experienced. His neck ached horribly, his brain was on fire, his heart, which had been fluttering faintly, gave a great leap, trying to force itself out at his mouth. His whole body was racked and wrenched with an insupportable anguish, but his disobedient hands gave no heed to the command. They beat the water vigorously with quick downward strokes, forcing him to the surface. He felt his head emerge, His eyes were blinded by the sunlight, his chest expanded convulsively, and with a supreme and crowning agony his lungs engulfed a great draught of air, which instantly he expelled in a shriek. He was now in full possession of his physical senses. They were indeed preternaturally keen and alert. Something in the awful disturbance of his organic system had so exalted and refined them that they made a record of things never before perceived. He felt the ripples upon his face and heard their separate sounds as they struck. He looked at the forest on the bank of the stream, saw the individual trees, the leaves, and the veining of each leaf. He saw the very insects upon them, the locusts, the brilliant-bodied flies, the grey spiders stretching their webs from twig to twig. He noticed the prismatic colours in all the dewdrops upon a million blades of grass, the humming of the gnats that danced above the eddies of the stream, the beating of the dragonfly's wings, the strokes of the water spider's legs like oars which had lifted their boat. All these made audible music. A fish slid along beneath his eyes, and he heard the rush of its body parting the water. He had come to the surface, facing down the stream. In a moment the visible world seemed to wheel slowly round, himself the pivotal point, and he saw the bridge, the fort, the soldiers upon the bridge, the captain, the sergeant, the two privates, his executioners. They were in silhouette against the blue sky. They shouted and gesticulated, pointing at him. The captain had drawn his pistol, but did not fire. The others were unarmed. Their movements were grotesque and horrible, their forms gigantic. Suddenly he heard a sharp report, and something struck the water smartly within a few inches of his head, spattering his face with spray. He heard a second report, and saw one of the sentinels with his rifle at his shoulder, a light cloud of blue smoke rising from the muzzle. The man in the water saw the eye of the man on the bridge, gazing into his own through the sights of the rifle. He observed that it was a grey eye, and remembered having read that grey eyes were keenest, and that all famous marksmen had them. Nevertheless, this one had missed. A counterswirl had caught Farker and turned him half round. He was again looking at the forest on the bank opposite the fort. The sound of a clear high voice in a monotonous sing-song now rang out behind him, and came across the water with a distinctness that pierced and subdued all other sounds, even the beating of the ripples in his ears. Although no soldier, he had frequented camp enough to know the dread significance of that deliberate, drawling, aspirated chant. The lieutenant on shore was taking a part in the morning's work. How coldly and pitilessly, with what an even, calm intonation, presaging and enforcing tranquillity in the men, with what accurately measured interval fell those cruel words. "Company! Attention! Shoulder! Arms! Ready! Aim! Fire!" Farker dived as deeply as he could. The water roared in his ears like the voice of Niagara, yet he heard the dull thunder of the volley, and, rising again toward the surface, met shining bits of metal, singularly flat and oscillating slowly downwards. Some of them touched him on the face and hands, then fell away, continuing their descent. One lodged between his collar and neck. It was uncomfortably warm, and he snatched it out. As he rose to the surface, gasping for breath, he saw that he had been a long time under water. He was perceptibly farther downstream, nearer to safety. The soldiers had almost finished reloading. The metal ramrods flashed all at once in the sunshine as they were drawn from the barrels, turned in the air and thrust into their sockets. The two sentinels fired again, independently and ineffectually. The hunted man saw all this over his shoulder. He was now swimming vigorously with the current. His brain was as energetic as his arms and legs. He thought with the rapidity of lightning. "The officer," he reasoned, "will not make that martinet's error a second time. It's as easy to dodge a volley as a single shot. He has probably already given the command to fire at will. God help me, I cannot dodge them all." An appalling splash within 2 yards of him was followed by a loud, rushing sound. Diminuendo, which seemed to travel back through the air to the fort and died in an explosion which had stirred the very river to its deeps. A rising sheet of water curved over him, fell down on him, blinded him, strangled him. The cannon had taken a hand in the game. As he shook his head free from the commotion of the smitten water, he heard the deflected shot humming through the air ahead, and in an instant it was cracking and smashing the branches in the forest beyond. They will not do that again, he thought. The next time they will use a charge of grape. I must keep my eye upon the gun. The smoke will apprise me. The report arrives too late. It lags behind the missile. That is a good gun. Suddenly he felt himself whirled round and round, spinning like a top. The water, the banks, the forests, the now distant bridge, fort and men, all were commingled and blurred. Objects were represented by their colours only, circular horizontal streaks of colour. That was all he saw. He had been caught in a vortex and was being whirled on with a velocity of advance and gyration that made him giddy and sick. In few moments he was flung upon the gravel at the foot of the left bank of the stream, the southern bank, and behind a projecting point which concealed him from his enemies. The sudden arrest of his motion, the abrasion of one of his hands on the gravel restored him, and he wept with delight. He dug his fingers into the sand, threw it over himself in handfuls, and audibly blessed it. It looked like diamonds, rubies, emeralds. He could think of nothing beautiful which it did not resemble. The trees upon the bank were giant garden plants. He noted a definite order in their arrangement, inhaled the fragrance of their blooms. A strange roseate light shone through the spaces among their trunks, and the wind made in their branches the music of aeolian harps. He had not wished to perfect his escape. He was content to remain in that enchanting spot until retaken. A whiz and a rattle of grape shot among the branches high above his head roused him from his dream. The baffled cannoneer had fired him a random farewell. He sprang to his feet, rushed up the sloping bank, and plunged into the forest. All that day he travelled, laying his course by the rounding sun. The forest seemed interminable. Nowhere did he discover a break in it, not even a woodman's road. He had not known that he lived in so wild a region. There was something uncanny in the revelation. By nightfall he was fatigued, footsore, famished. The thought of his wife and children urged him on. At last he found a road which led in what he knew to be the right direction. It was as wide and straight as a city street, yet it seemed untravelled. No fields bordered it, no dwelling anywhere. Not so much as the barking of a dog suggested human habitation. The black bodies of the trees formed a straight wall on both sides, terminating on the horizon in a point like a diagram in a lesson in perspective. Overhead, as he looked up through this rift in the wood, shone great golden stars looking unfamiliar and grouped in strange constellations. He was sure they were arranged in some order which had a secret and malign significance. The wood on either side was full of singular noises, among which, once, twice, and again, he distinctly heard whispers in an unknown tongue. His neck was in pain, and lifting his hand to it found it horribly swollen. He knew that it had a circle of black where the rope had bruised it. His eyes felt congested. He could no longer close them. His tongue was swollen with thirst. He relieved his fever by thrusting it forward from between his teeth into the cold air. How softly the turf had carpeted the untravelled avenue. He could no longer feel the roadway beneath his feet. Doubtless, despite his suffering, he'd fallen asleep while walking. For now, he sees another scene. Perhaps he has merely recovered from a delirium. He stands at the gate of his own home. All is as he left it, all bright and beautiful in the morning sunshine. He must have travelled the entire night. As he pushes open the gate and passes up the wide white walk, he sees a flutter of female garments. His wife, looking fresh and cool and sweet, steps down from the veranda to meet him. At the bottom of the steps she stands, waiting, with a smile of ineffable joy, an attitude of matchless grace and dignity. Ah, how beautiful she is! He springs forwards with extended arms. As he is about to clasp her, he feels a stunning blow upon the back of the neck. A blinding white light blazes all about him, with a sound like the shock of a cannon. Then all is darkness and silence. Peyton Farker was dead. His body, with a broken neck, swung gently from side to side beneath the timbers of the Owl Creek Bridge.
If you enjoy the Classic Ghost Stories podcast and want to support the show, consider becoming a member on Patreon. You'll get early access to episodes, bonus content, and the feeling of helping keep these haunting tales alive. And if YouTube is your preferred place to listen, you can join as a member there instead. No need to sign up for both. It's the same content either way. So, if you'd like to support the podcast and keep the ghostly tales coming, head over to Patreon or join on YouTube. Either way, every membership helps another tale rise from the grave of the past.
So that was An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge by Ambrose Bierce. And I've been asked for that story, to do that story loads of times. If I had a penny, if every time I was asked, I'd probably have 8 pence, maybe 9. Anyway, so as we normally do, I'll give you a bit of Ambrose Bierce. Now, I know before I start, people go, that wasn't a ghost story. There will be the comments on this. I guarantee if you look at the comments, people will say that. Yeah, no, maybe. But I did it anyway. It was a good story. You must remember I like stories in general, and I still have the Classic Detective Stories podcast, which is on holiday at the moment. And I've got the Classic Stories, which I look at like literary stories and do those because I'm interested in all kinds of stories, not just ghost stories. So I'm not going to argue with you. I did it. That's it. So Ambrose Bierce, born 1842, died around 1914. So he was an American. And the other reason I kind of hesitated for doing it is that question, is it a ghost story? And even though people were asking for me to do it on this channel, and it's a very American story, and I'm not very American, and I wondered if people would be upset about that. There will be some people comment on that as well. But Imogen actually started helping me, and she didn't realise how much people complain. She's like, but they're getting it for free. And I go, yeah, I know. They just complain though. Not everybody. The majority of people don't. I would say it's probably 95% of people are really supportive, but there's about 5% of moaning minis. And I just kind of block them really now. I used to get upset by them, but if I saw them now, I'd batter them. I'd have a fight with them. I'm pretty tough now. I go to the gym a lot, so they don't want to mess with me. Anyway, so let's get back to Ambrose. He was a tough guy. He was. So he was born on June 24th in, I can't say this properly, Meigs County, Meigs, that's how I would say it, Ohio. He was the 10th of 13 children in a farming family, his poor mother. Bierce's early years were spent in Indiana, although he was born in Idaho. No, he wasn't. He was born in Ohio. And he acquired much of his education independently, making significant use of his family's modest library. But he was a bright kid, you can tell that from his writing. At age 15, he worked as a printer's apprentice and later attended the Kentucky Military Institute. During the American Civil War, Bierce enlisted in the 9th, this is where I got Indiana from, 9th Indiana Volunteer Infantry, and participated in several major battles. I'm going to butcher these names: Shiloh, Chickamauga, and Kennesaw Mountain. These are really important to Americans, and I've just kind of trampled all over them, so I sincerely apologize. He was seriously wounded at Kennesaw Mountain in 1864. I'm going to look how you pronounce that just to get it right, just for a bit of respect. Yeah, it turns out I was pronouncing it pretty right anyway, in Cobb County, Georgia. Now, you might say, why didn't you look that up before? That's another fair point. I just got to bow down before you there. It's a fair point. But anyway, let's get back to Ambrose. I like Ambrose. There's a lot about Ambrose I really like. He was cited for acts of bravery, and after the war was given an honorary or brevet, I think you say that, rank of major. Historical records vary on whether this was a formal US Army commission. After his military service, Bierce moved to San Francisco, California, and established himself in journalism. He wrote for and edited several West Coast publications, including the San Francisco Newsletter, the Argonaut, and the San Francisco Examiner. His satirical and critical commentaries on society earned him a reputation for wit and sharpness. Later sources sometimes refer to him as the wickedest man in San Francisco. I bet that's hard to get that accolade. Although this nickname is more a product of later critical commentary than a term. I'm not just saying that because I'm not being anti-San Francisco. I'm just saying any city that's a hard one. If you live in a village of 150 people, you possibly could manage to be the wickedest, but big city, you've got to put a lot of work into it. Anyway, he later moved to London, England, between 1872 and 1875, and he lived in London, and he published essays, sketches, and satirical works in British periodicals such as Fun and Figaro. Then he went back to San Francisco, continued his career as a journalist, became a central figure in West Coast literary circles. He published several major works: Tales of Soldiers and Civilians, 1891, later titled In the Midst of Life, and this is his most acclaimed collection. And it has lots of his Civil War experiences, including this one, An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. His work on supernatural and horror fiction, such as An Inhabitant of Carcosa, has been acknowledged as influential in the evolution of American weird fiction. This is one of these things. It was claimed that because Robert Chambers used Carcosa, and Lovecraft cited Carcosa as well. So people are going, he influenced them. And then there's academic debate. Well, did he influence them? What does influence mean? What does writer mean? What does somebody... I complained about academics being people who make their living about ripping apart the dead corpses of their predecessors to make some minor point and pride themselves on the detail that they get from this. Which is harsh, but this is what this kind of debate is. Did he influence H.P. Lovecraft and Robert Chambers? Yeah. To what extent? That's an essay question, isn't it? So anyway, he's also noted for the Devil's Dictionary, 1911, a collection of satirical definitions, which is widely cited in American literary studies for its irony and skepticism. You can get copies of that. Kind of find them in modern bookshops. Then in 1913, he travelled to Mexico intending to observe the ongoing revolution. His last confirmed communication was from Chihuahua. I've got to say something about dogs. I'm not going to say anything about dogs. He was bitten by a dog. Some kind of weak joke about dogs, because I find Chihuahua a funny name because it's associated with dogs. It's pathetic, isn't it, really? Because it's like Alsace is associated with Alsatians, or Cheshire is associated with cats. I don't find those funny. So why is Chihuahua funny? Well, Chihuahuas are funny dogs. I'm sorry if you've got one. They're very, very angry. They have the anger of 1,000 men crammed into a tiny body. Whereas I only have the anger of about 50 men crammed into a middle-sized body. Anyway, so he left Chihuahua and nothing happened. And he'd written a really interesting piece about that he made some of the stuff up. He wasn't above, out of fun, fabricating fake news, basically, just for the crack, as we'd say. So I admire him for that as well, to be honest, because the truth, come on. If you can have a funnier lie. No. I'm not saying, oh, God, I can just see the comments now. People spitting out their coffee, you hammering the table, jumping up and down, shouting to their wives, Maureen, that Tony Walker's gone too far this time. Anyway, let's talk about An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, published 1890. Lots of things to say about this. It's a brilliant story. He was a fantastic writer, honest. His mastery of literary form. I think his plotting is awesome. He would be a fantastic thriller writer if he was writing these days. His mastery of how to put a story together in bits. Like if it was a kit and you put this bit and put bit, he just knows exactly how to do that. So it's 3 sections. Let's talk about Peyton Farquhar first. Easy for you to say. Or Farquhar Peyton, as I was calling him at one point. He's a very naive character. I think in a very few lines, Bierce manages to conjure up this bloke who, obviously Bierce fought for the other side, but it's so old Peyton clearly he's dressing, he's got this really romantic idea of this romantic adventure. War as a fantastic idea, and this is like Ambrose Bierce, who knows it's not, it really isn't. It's the most horrific thing, but this guy is he must have, I imagine, although you don't even get a hint of that, I can imagine Bierce would not think very highly of people like this. But this is me just imagining it. But given knowing that, he was injured in combat, and he knew what it was like. And this guy, he's privileged, isn't he? And of course, it's his defense of his own side is purely self-interested. He is a planter. Bierce says this, he owns slaves. Of course he's going to support a side. The other side's going to put him out of business. So, of course he is, but he dresses this up as some kind of romantic naivety. But what Bierce is so good at is he doesn't over-egg it. It would be such a temptation to push this character into the absurd and make you dislike him. Whereas he just keeps him as this romantic adventurer, which I think you see throughout. What I mean by that is we have this idea of this well-to-do, well-dressed guy who thinks it's a great wheeze to go and sabotage a bridge and get caught because he's crap. And, well, of course he is. It's like a 12-year-old's idea of war. Anyway, so and then we get the lovely descriptions of the leaves and the fish and things like that. And so I think what Bierce allows this flawed man, Peyton Farquhar, to at least have some beauty. It would be so easy for him just to paint him completely one color, but he doesn't, and I think that's a tribute to his skill as a writer. And of course, this Federal scout comes up and tells him and lures him, and old Peyton doesn't see this coming. He just gets scammed all the time. He'd get emails from people claiming to want to give him $50 million because somebody in Nigeria has died. He'd go, yeah, here's my bank account details. No problem at all. Poor old Peyton. And of course he gets caught, and that is the reality of it is there's all sorts of things going on in this story, but it is the idealist slapping bang against the brick wall of reality, which all idealists have to at some point. Life comes and is non-negotiable. You may wish it to be different, but it's not, and you've just got to deal with the brick wall that you've just run your face into, and because of your silly idealism. And anyway, so there we are. And that is portrayed as the army, the mechanism of the army. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We're talking about Peyton, really. Let's talk about the structure. So it's a very simple it's a short story in both senses. And it preserves the Aristotelian unities. So the Aristotelian unities were dreamt up by Aristotle way back when he's talking about drama, and he set out how drama is good, and you need to keep a unity of time, a unity of place, and a unity of character. So the unity of time, the entire action on the bridge occupies only the few seconds or minutes. It doesn't sprawl across years, days, weeks, and it's very linear in lots of ways, even though it's in 3 bits, and each bit has a completely different character. There is a unity of time, okay, unity of place. Owl Creek Bridge is, Peyton's in his house, his plantation to start off about, but really, Owl Creek Bridge is in the center of this story, and he floats down the river a bit, or does he? Well, he doesn't, does he? But anyway, and so unity of place and unity of character, everything really is coming through Peyton Farquhar's senses, thoughts and feelings, but of course Bierce is really clever because he uses each section slightly differently. So the first one is a very camera section. This is before cinema, but it's an establishing shot, isn't it? We see it, we see him, and this emphasizes the centrality of the bridge, the symbol of the bridge, which we'll talk about slightly a bit more further on. And also, but it's you can see it, and it dehumanizes. It's about those people are not people. They have no character. Even when he's describing the posture of the soldiers, which you would know very well, all the drill positions with the rifle, but the they are automata. They are placeholders. They are fulfilling a function in the army. They're not people. They are fungible units of discipline. And when I think it's also another thing I was saying is when I used to use a British pronunciation, lieutenant. Actually, lieutenant is correct, isn't it? Lieutenant, it's from French, that placeholder. But the British forces use lieutenant, and I felt, well, I can't really do this in an English accent and say lieutenant. That will come. Is the creeping Americanization of British speech. I mean, young people say gotten now, which we never did. I think they say Z rather than Z as well. But there is an Americanization of British English which is going on apace. So we, probably will be saying lieutenant. I imagine a lot of young people would say lieutenant now, actually, but officially lieutenant. So there we go. I apologise for that, because of the British people slapping the tea down on the table. Maureen, he's gone too far with this pronunciation. Lieutenant. I just wanted to avoid that. Anyway, so I've talked about the first scene, and the next bit is a bit of a backstory, isn't it? And it's character for him, and we see him as a man, a bit of a fool, really. And the third and the longer part is about his execution, which is given. So the first is cinematic. The second is sort of third person looking down. Almost you're eavesdropping on what's going on, aren't you? Just like a cinema scene. You can imagine you're watching him and his wife. And then the third one is right in his head. And it's the clock, tick, tick, tick. It's the bright lights. It's the falling underwater. It's the sensations. It's these ideas of his body, his hands undoing the rope. And you're thinking this probably isn't true because his neck would have broken, but yeah, maybe it's written in such a way as if you hadn't heard the story before, you might be convinced that he had somehow escaped. And of course, Bierce sets this up wonderfully because he has him look at the river and consider the plan of escaping before he dies. Consider the plan, and so we have this long hallucination, this time dilation. And if you've been at the dentist's, you know what this is. Or if you've had a good time, you also know what it is. Time shrinks. There's Henri Bergson's duration, isn't it? Time. There are two kinds of time. One is, and I think the Greeks have chronos and kairos for the same thing. So there's elongated time, which we all measure, and then there's how time feels, which actually comes and goes. It shrinks and it grows depending on where you are. So this second has not only expanded. We have that expansion of time while he's waiting to be executed. And then we have this hallucinatory drop into the river. And in a sense, you think, well, set it up, but is it unfair? And then we twist at the end, he's dead, really. And some readers apparently have said they don't think this is fair, and they slam the book down, or in this case, they punch the speaker. Not me, the speaker, but the mechanism, because they're so upset. You think I'm joking? I have seen the rage of people who get so incensed about things that happen in stories. It's quite tragic. They all need to be medicated, as far as I'm concerned. But and I used to do that, of course, but I don't do it anymore. So illusion versus reality. Yeah, we're into the interior stream, which is a very modernist technique. Remember, he's writing this in 1890. Modernism starts coming about over the next 10, 20 years. And this is where they start messing around with stories and how to tell stories. And it shows that there is things develop, don't they? And this is a pre-modernist story. But this flow of consciousness is something you get in Virginia Woolf and Mrs. Galloway. It's George Galloway's wife. No, Mrs. Dalloway. And this fragmentation and playing around with telling a story, not just the traditional, if you think traditional stories are where this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, and we are given to believe that the person who's telling us the truth. We don't doubt it. What he says happens. And then modernists kind of mess around with it. And so the Agatha Christie, of course, famously, Murder of Roger Ackroyd, famously the unreliable narrator. So, and then that upset a lot of people as well, to be honest, when she did that. But So yeah, it's in terms of, it's ahead of its time in technique. Let's talk a bit about. So, one of the, if you look into this story, you say one of the themes is war's dehumanizing effect, and indeed the soldiers that execute this man, compared with his naive Don Quixote type presence in the world, they are automata. They're just units of the military machine, and it's a system, and the line between courage and cruelty blurs. There is no cruelty involved in it. It's just a mechanism. It is like the clock. There's no mercy. There's no humanity. There's no fear. There's no. It's not like they don't want to do their orders. They just do it. That's just automata. And so the rifles and the cannon and the soldiers and the mechanisms of the bridge and the planks and all that kind of business, they're one. They are just one machine. The operators of a procedure. Finality of death, people talk about as a theme. I don't buy that, actually. Don't think that. There is no escape. I think what it's about is what I said about running into the brick wall of reality. So, here we are, and we want the world to be different. We don't want the world to be like it is. We want it to be different. We wish it was different. We may pray, we may hope, we may do little magic rituals. We may just kind of daydream about the world being different. But then, and even for ourselves, we have these dreams about our own lives. And the world just comes along, and the facts, as they say, don't care much about your feelings. And boom, that's it. Oh, your mum's dead. Oh, right. Oh, you've had a car crash. Oh, shit. You just gone bankrupt. Oh, well. And good things can happen as well. Indiscriminately, it's as if, you could find treasure trove in your back garden, or a tree could fall on you, and you just happen to have the bad luck of being under that tree. And so this is a foolish man who is caught, and there is no mercy for him, and he has this daydream of mercy, which he gives himself. And he sees his lovely wife at the end. It reminded me of a near-death experience, actually, and probably I would say that if you wanted to write your thesis on an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge as a near-death experience, with the visions that people get on the point of death or in the process of death, and there's lots of literature on that now. I'm convinced by it, by the way. I think you could do that. So. But I think it is to me that the themes of this are the machine and its implacable reality that it doesn't care about you, versus the dreamer, the idealist, the petit prince, as Jung would say, the puer aeternus, the eternal boy who believes in all this romance and castles in space, and he's going to be a knight and he's going to die for the queen and all this kind of stuff, Anyway, let's talk about, this time. I think time isn't so much the symbolism. I think time is related to the technique, and we talked about the modernist techniques, but it's also, he does this wonderfully. And of course the driftwood going by, his life is being measured away. What was it? Prufrock, Eliot's Prufrock, measuring his life in teaspoons. And this is, all our lives are measured in things like, I'm sorry, I'm being a bit bleak today. But yeah, I think he does that really well. So time is an issue here. Time is something to do with this story. And then let's talk about the river. Let's talk about the river, yeah. So he falls in the river. Let's think about rivers. Well, of course, we're thinking of the boatman, Charon, the Greek boatman who ferries you across the Styx to the world of the dead. So that's clearly got to be a resonance here. The second river I think of is Lethe, which is another Greek river where the water is water of forgetting, so that you forget your life. And that's definitely in there. And the third, of course, is the Jordan, which is a kind of baptism into another life. Now, I'm stretching this. Bierce doesn't really go that far with it, but I couldn't help but think of it. Jordan the Crossing, Prefab Sprout, or Jordan the Comeback, one of those. And so I think the water's really interesting. The other one is the bridge itself. Does the bridge symbolize those times in our life where reality comes and taps us on the shoulder? You know, that day when you've had the test and you go into the doctor and the doctor says, well, Mr. Walker, I'm afraid I've got some bad news. And you know that day is going to come, but you've avoided it so far. And here it is. It isn't really for me. I've just had my aorta checked and it was fine. I've had my PSA checked. It was fine. So I've had loads of other checks. So I'm fine. But you never know what's around the corner. It could be that I get run over today. Or Jasper goes crazy and attacks me and rips me to pieces. He won't do that, though. He loves me too much. Sheila might. But no, I'm joking. Yeah, so the bridge is that, I think it's that crosshairs. I see it as a crosshair of the, you remember he talks about the man's looking through the sights of the rifle. It's that crosshair of life. Boom, here you are. And what's that line? The Rubaiyat of Khayyam. The moving finger writes and having, I'm going to butcher this, the moving finger writes and having written moves on. And not all thy tears, nor piety, nor wit will draw it back to erase a line, no, to change a word or erase a line of it. Something like that. It's your crosshairs of your life, bang, on the bridge. And of course, in other ways, it's symbolic of the wider American scene at the time. South-north journey, a thing that was commercial, which was enriching for both sides, you would have imagined, is now a conflict point. It's almost like the omphalos, which is in the center of the world. You know, if you were to draw a map, I mean, you used to draw maps with Jerusalem as the center of the world, and the Greeks had. Was it Delphi as the omphalos, which is a Greek word, meaning navel, I believe? You know, your belly button, and not as in a ship. And this is what the bridge is. It both divides and brings together. It is a place outside the world. In a sense, it's a sacred place. It's a place of his death. It's a place of execution, which were always not normal places. There was a lot of the numinous around. That's why ghosts were said to haunt them, you know. That's what the bridge is, I think, and probably more things. So I think, so symbolically, we have time, we have the river, we have the bridge. But so the takeaways from this are, it's a brilliant story. It's masterfully put together. 3 sections from 3 slightly different points of view, all dealing with the same character, but cinematically done very differently. The first is cinematic. The second is third-person eavesdropping, and the third is right inside his head with all his experiences. And the way they're put together. The twist ending, I forgive him for. Why not? He was ahead of his time with those. I think it's a fantastic story. And as to whether it's a ghost story, well, technically, potentially, he was both dead and not. I mean, we know it. There he was with his neck broken, pretty dead, pretty quick. And yet he's having this extended hallucination. So you could argue that it was some kind of ghost. I'm stretching it, I know. But it was a good story. I hope you liked it too. There's the bell.